Grant Rumley is a research analyst for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Grant, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, they're fighting over ceasefires. There have been ceasefires so far in this conflict. Do you think there'll be another one?
Well, what we've seen so far are 12-hour or day-long humanitarian ceasefires that have essentially been disrupted by Hamas rockets. Hamas appears to have no intention of keeping or maintaining these ceasefires, whereas Israel, for the most part, has abided by them. What most diplomats and Western countries are looking for is a window with which they can negotiate a longer, more durable ceasefire, one that lasts between 5 and 7 days, that can set the stage for future talks and a more prolonged quiet.
The White House gets on the phone with Benjamin Netanyahu. What do you think the feeling was once they hung up?
Well, U.S.-Israel relations have been well documented, and Obama and Netanyahu don't have the closest relationship. But right now, I think what Obama is looking for and what Kerry has looked for the past couple of weeks is for Israel to show a measure of restraint with its response. There have been strikes at schools and whatnot. These are difficult for Israel to manage because these schools, this UN school, has been shown to house rockets, to house Hamas rockets, to have Hamas tunnels underneath it and around it. What the U.S. is looking for is for Israel to maintain the calm, and what Israel is looking for is to eradicate the tunnels. Now, at some point, something's got to give. It appears as if Israel will abide by this ceasefire at least until tomorrow, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Years ago, the Israeli government, the IDF, pulled out of Gaza. Do you think they're back in there for the long term?
Well, this was one of the concerns from the beginning, was a type of mission creep where Israel would put boots on the grounds and eventually the mission would go from destroying the tunnels and eradicating the rocket supply to eventually overthrowing Hamas, to possibly reoccupy. Now, there's been talk from right-wing ministers within the Israeli government about reoccupying. Most Israelis are against it. Netanyahu is against it. But there are talks now, and there are poll numbers among the Israeli public that support the mission ongoing. So what I think we'll see happen is Israel will maintain the ceasefire. We'll see how Hamas reacts, and that has been shooting rockets off. And then we'll see, I think at some point we'll realize how much of the tunnels, how much of the infrastructure has been hit, and whether Israel can consider that a success at this point.
Now, not that long ago, people were talking about the peace process and whether there were any hopes at all for that. The unity government sort of put that on the back burner. Do you think that it's even further off the stove now?
Well, I think what we've seen is essentially two different axes develop throughout this entire process. You've seen Israel, Egypt, and the Palestinian Authority led by Mahmoud Abbas on one negotiating axis, and on another you've seen Hamas, Turkey, and Qatar. And it used to be that John Kerry reached out to Egypt, and he reached out to Israel, and he reached out to Abbas, and those ceasefire brokers, it didn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so Kerry turned to Qatar and Turkey, and Israel was heavily critical of that. And many critics, both within and without the region, have criticized Kerry for that approach. And now the ceasefire is really in shambles at this point in terms of U.S. influence. So in terms of a unity government, Fatah and Hamas have both stated that they're committed to maintaining the unity government, that it is a national consensus government. But I think in the next couple of months, as they prepare for whatever aftermath from this operation and elections on the way, I think it's enough to destabilize what remains of the unity government.
Grant Rumley from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.